Welcome to I Found This Great Book. My name is Curtis, and today, I'm really excited because I get to talk to one of my sheroes, a fantastic mystery author who, if you like a detective, private investigator mystery that has a strong central character and just wonderful stories, you want to read the author I am going to introduce to you now, and that is Cheryl Head. Cheryl, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Curtis. It's really nice to be with you. I love the work you're doing.
Thank you. So I'm a huge fan of your work. I've been pestering you for a while because I wanted to
Grateful.
talk to you, and I'm just so happy to have you here and share with my audience your work. Now, everybody, we need to understand who we're talking to. Cheryl is named to the Hall of Fame of the Saints and Sinners Literary Festival, and she's a board of director member of Bouchercon. Did I pronounce it? Bouchercon.
Yes.
And that's a nonprofit organization that holds an annual convention in honor of Anthony Boucher, who's a distinguished mystery fiction critic, editor, and author. They have a convention coming up August 25th through 29th. I guess in-person convention. That's
right.
Kind of cool. And they're in New Orleans.
Yep.
Now, I'm jealous.
August in New Orleans, we're going to be sweating, but we'll be there.
That's all right. And if you have any interest, like if you're like, hey, I'm in New Orleans at that time, or hey, I'm looking for an excuse to go down there, just go to www.bouchercon, Bouchercon 2021, that's Bouchercon2021.com, and you can register. And I think you would see Cheryl down there, right?
Yeah, I'll be there, and thousands of other mystery writers and fans. It's the largest fan convention for crime and mystery fiction in the world.
Okay, so that's going to be on my 2022 agenda.
Yes.
I can't do it this year.
Right. Okay.
But
it's Minneapolis next year.
Okay. All right. Okay. You know what? I'm going to make every effort to be there. That would be so much fun. So Cheryl is the author of the Charlie Mack Motown Mystery Series. There are 6 books in this series. I recommend you head on over and get all 6 right now. Well, wait, finish listening and then go get the 6 books. Okay. And the 6th book in the series, Warn Me When It's Time, just was released recently. I love it. I've got it. I read it. It's good. There are a couple of parts there. I'm going to ask why. Well, I can't spoil it. So offline, I'm going to have to ask Cheryl why she did that to me, but that's all right. But you're going to love the book, love the series. And we're just going to dig a little into the series. So the sleuth of the Charlie Mack mystery series is Charlie Mack. And she has a lot of layers to her characters. To me, she's like this glue that holds together this cast of characters who probably would not engage with each other and might be fighting each other in the street if it wasn't for Charlie. Can we talk about the members of her team on the Mack investigation and how she came to work with them?
Absolutely. Well, Charlie herself is a Black, queer private investigator. She's had several other careers before she came to the PI game. She has owned several businesses. She's an overachiever for sure. She's on a martial arts school, so she has a couple of black belts. She ran a public relations firm, so she knows how to handle herself, talking to people, a good communicator, knows how to work up and down the managerial line, the hierarchies of cities. She went to law school, and she was recruited from law school to the first class of Department of Homeland Security agents. So this would have been very late 2001 after DHS was formed. They were trolling law schools looking for people to become agents, and she was one of the first in the class. At DHS, she met two of her partners in her private investigation agency, which is called the Mack Agency, because she put up the money and she's the head of the agency. She met her fellow agent and lawyer, Gil Acosta, and they became fast friends. Gil is a Mexican American, third generation, kind of knows himself in Detroit. Detroit's a city where you need to have a little swagger,
Yeah.
and Gil has lots of swagger. He was an All-American high school basketball player, um, good-looking guy, a ladies' man. He went off to join his brother in one of the Afghan wars, comes back to Detroit, has money to go to school, goes to law school, and he meets Charlie first at law school, and then they go together to Department of Homeland Security. While they're there, there's a trainer whose name is Don Rutkowski, who's a former police officer, and he's been recruited to DHS as well as a trainer. And he and Charlie get off to a shaky start, which I talk about in book one, but then get a begrudging respect for each other because they're both tough characters. They both have a sense of integrity and a code they bring to the work that they do. And then after Charlie has been at DHS for a couple of years, she becomes really uncomfortable about the profiling that Department of Homeland Security and ICE are doing around Muslim Americans. And in Detroit, we have one of the largest Muslim American populations outside of the Middle East. And so she convinces Gil and later Don to leave DHS and form this agency to do private investigation work. And that's really how the story begins in book one.
Hmm.
They also inherit. I should mention this. They also inherit an office manager, Judy Novak, a middle-aged Polish American woman, a couple of teenage kids, and a husband. And Judy's just sharp. Judy is one of those unassuming characters you might meet in Detroit. You look at her and think housewife, but Judy really knows how to get anything she wants out of anybody she approaches. She and Charlie like to kid each other that they know how to lie their way out of any kind of situation. Judy can get you to open up about things when other people can't. Even though she's a middle-aged mom, she's really kind of a technology wizard. She's an early adopter, as they say, and often is the one who has to teach Charlie and Gil about some new cell phone or a new piece of hardware or new laptop, a new app. And Don, who's just a Luddite, who I haven't talked about yet. He's the last one to come aboard when it comes to technology, unless the technology is a gun.
Yeah.
So Don Rutkowski is a Polish American man, former police officer, the trainer I talked about at DHS, and he's also ingrained in him this Archie Bunkerism. I guess that is the best way I would describe it. He is the he is your typical white man, privileged, middle aged, middle class, a little heavy set.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily a racist, but he brings his prejudices, the ones he's grown up with. His privilege as a white man gives him this point of view and his view of the world that is that is one you would expect from Archie Bunker. So when he and Charlie, even though they have a respect for each other and are friends, and the trajectory of their friendship really develops over the series, they're constantly at odds, along with Judy, at kind of correcting Don's political incorrectness.
Mm-hmm.
He's the first person to call somebody out of their name. He doesn't trust anyone. He's very suspicious of all people. He has kind of a resentment around 2001 that really has him unable to interact with Muslims on an equal footing. He really holds residual resentment towards Muslim Americans, but he's an equal opportunity bigot.
Yeah.
And so, he doesn't care for Russians, he doesn't care for Chinese Americans, African Americans. He's so he brings his prejudices to every interaction.
Mm.
What that allows in the series is an opportunity for me to put words in his mouth that I think a lot of people want to say out loud but don't. And also, he helps in the trajectory of Charlie's character and usually the trajectory of every book. So Charlie can bring an empathetic view of a situation, and Don comes at it as, yes, that might be true, but if he moves, I'm going to shoot him
Yeah.
and kill him.
Yeah.
You know, so I have a lot of fun writing Don. I literally, when I'm literally laughing out loud usually when I'm writing what Don is saying. You know, it's almost kind of the thing I would want to say if I wasn't nice.
Ah,
If I
okay.
had a if I had an alternate Twitter account and I could just say anything I wanted to say, it would be Don's words.
Aha.
So
Okay.
those are my cast of characters. One other one I should mention, Curtis, is Charlie's mother, Ernestine, who has early onset Alzheimer's, and she's a recurring character in the series. And I have her there because I like her character. She's a smart woman. She's a school principal. She's retired. She often helps with the case. She's a dynamite researcher.
Hmm.
But I wanted there to have the relationship between the mother and daughter, Charlie and her mom, and how that softens Charlie. Charlie, who is a person who is not that in touch with her feelings, and all these characters really help her in developing kind of a better sense of herself. She's kind of a hard ass,
Yeah.
I would say.
Well, I think you have to be, Charlie has to be because
Yeah,
she has to be tough because
she's tough.
one, just holding that cast of characters together, but also just doing the things she does, being as brave as she is to step into
Hmm.
these things and always being this outsider. I mean, she's an
Hmm.
outsider in terms of law. She's not, she stepped out of traditional law enforcement or,
Right.
or the safety of being, having a badge,
That's right.
to be out there on her own trying to solve these things where you don't have that protection.
That's right.
Yeah, where someone might not mind hurting you as opposed to hurting somebody who's in Department of Homeland Security. You don't necessarily want
That's
to hurt a
right.
federal agent, but
That's right.
but
And she does that out of her idealism. She certainly comes at justice in a slightly different way than the normal noir PI protagonist
mhm.
would. I mean, because she's a black woman and she's a black queer woman, so she sees things in a slightly different way. And that's the part of my um, involvement in crime fiction and my contribution to crime fiction is to bring a different kind of noir character, one that appreciates the tropes and the characteristics of the noir protagonist, but brings a new thing. And I hope I'm doing that.
Yeah, you are, and I love that. I love that she has a family, she
Hmm.
has relations, and she's not just this lone person who,
Right.
other than interacting with the victims, you know, because some of the standard tropes, the only time you see families when they're in trouble, and
Right.
then oh, here's my cousin. Well, I got to go help him.
that's,
All right, now just go on about your business, and
that's
I'm gonna go back to my office, put my feet up, smoke a
and-
lucky,
and-
and
that's right.
drink
Drink some
my
scotch.
drink my scotch, and
That's right.
sit back and yeah, and that's it.
Yeah.
Sam Spade had nothing in his refrigerator. You know?
Except maybe some ice cubes for the scotch.
Yeah, yeah. What what did you do? That all you do that would get old after a while. But
Right.
it was entertaining. But you start thinking more. But I love the way you do that, and I noticed that among black women who write mysteries, they bring in family. They don't
Yes.
have that lone person out there just doing whatever.
Right.
When especially in terms of the private sleuth, where you have this character who's tough, but also, hey, I have a mom. I need to take care of her and
Yeah,
watch
that's
out for
right.
her.
Yeah, I think it informs their moral compass to have family. It even helps Don become a better person through the trajectory of the series because of his wife and his son.
Yeah.
Yep.
It humanizes you so that you're
Yes.
not just this person on this vendetta and
Right.
going out doing things. So you mentioned something I found interesting, and I wanted to touch base on that. You mentioned that Department of Homeland Security was recruiting lawyers. Why
Yeah.
lawyers? Why not, rough and tumble cops or people who are military police? Why lawyers?
Yeah, it was they were recruiting, other kind of law enforcement officials too, but because the, of original work of the DHS was doing a lot of paperwork, really a lot of surveillance work, compiling files on people and things like that. They were also recruiting out of law school. I did a lot of research in establishing that because I wanted her to not come from the traditional law enforcement because I don't think she would have become a police officer.
Hmm.
But I think she was intrigued by the notion of being a DHS agent because she is also this woman who's got a sense of patriotism. So I think that's why she would wanna be part of that first class of agents. It was out of patriotism, but at the same time, when she gets there, it's her sense of integrity and her moral, compass that says, "Wait a minute, what's happening here in profiling people, all these people who have nothing to do with terrorism? That's not right."
Yeah. And that's one of the fascinating things to me, for when black authors are writing crime fiction, especially when they're writing fiction where the sleuth is or was a member of law enforcement. You kind of part of you, I mean, we are citizens of this country, and
Yeah,
this is our
that's right.
country as much as anyone else's. Our ancestry
Absolutely.
might go back further than a lot of other people who claim we should just leave.
Right.
And so it is your country, and you are proud of a lot of things, but then you butt up against stuff.
Yeah.
You just can't you just can't relax and just relax in it and
You
wave the
cannot
flag and
relax.
stand there and like, "Woohoo, yeah, 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 USA." Stuff happens and you're like, "Ugh." Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know how to describe it, but it's like you're in a car, you're running along fine, but for some reason you have to hit the retaining wall. And it's not good. And
No, that is
okay,
not a good thing.
where other people are in the middle lane and they're just like zzz, and you're like,
Well,
"No."
it's this whole sense of being other.
Yeah.
We are both a part and other, and I don't think we ever kind of lose that or let down our guard about that. Maybe the newest members of, maybe these millennials kind of feel a total part of the fabric of America, but most of us feel like we've got a couple loose threads in the
Yeah.
fabric. And so I want Charlie to both embrace her patriotism, but at the same time be a critic of the country that she loves. And I think we should all be like that as
Yeah.
citizens.
I
We
agree.
should, walk in lockstep with anybody. And that's why I resent it when these guys are at the January 6th insurrection waving the American flag like it belongs to them. It doesn't just belong to them, it belongs to me too. And, since my ancestors came against our free will, in some ways, I feel like we're more patriotic than anybody else. We're paying taxes and voting and serving our country, and we didn't come here by our own volition.
I agree. I agree fully. And all of those complexities come through in the story. So if you're reading, if you want a sleuth that has depth, you definitely want to check out this series. So you also, an interesting aspect for Charlie that I find fascinating, because normally the love interest or spouse of a sleuth is someone very, very far from crime. They're the person they run
Mhm.
to
Right.
who get them away. And there's always this strain because, you're always running out in the middle of the night to go do something.
Right.
So they have this strained relationship. Yet Charlie's girlfriend,
Yes,
Mandy, is a police officer.
that's right.
How did you make that choice? And how does it affect the writing of your stories?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Shirley is this type A personality and really an overachiever. Um, and she is bisexual. So at the beginning of the story, she has just recently divorced from her husband, but she and Mandy see each other at a police benevolent ball and are smitten with each other right away. And I think, it's Mandy's beauty, her charm, her sense of herself. She's a white woman, so it's an interracial relationship. I think she falls hard for Mandy because Mandy is really has some of this depth around feelings that Charlie doesn't have, that Charlie knows is missing and wants to have that. And also just the confidence that Mandy brings. I a lot of times when I'm developing these characters, they just kind of come to me whole cloth. And I think Mandy is one of them. There's not a lot about her in the books 2 and 3 and 4, but I'm starting to work on some storylines now to really flesh out her backstory, where she comes from, and what she does. And so I think they're a good match for each other. They challenge each other both intellectually and in the work that they do. They often get to, because Mandy's in law enforcement, she gets to work with Charlie on a couple of cases, and they're both brave women.
Uh-huh.
I like that about them.
Yeah. And again, that new dynamic that you bring to the genre, where you're pushing it in so many ways, but it makes it more real.
Yeah,
You know,
thank you, Chris.
so in a way, Charlie is. Everyone always talks about Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, but sometimes we talk about a dream, but then when the reality hits, they're like, "Wait a minute," because I think some people believe, no, okay, this is just me talking. Okay, this
Okay,
is not
okay.
Cheryl. This is Curtis. I think some people believe the dream was, okay, finally it's going to be a world of all Black people. We're going to be free of everyone else, and we're just going to have this world. And it's like, no, that's not
No,
quite it.
that's never going to happen.
And yeah, it's just not going to happen. And just like they're not going to have, some bigot is not going to have their dream of a world where there's only just
Right.
white people floating around.
That's right. They can go to space if they want to,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they're going
yeah.
to need some Black people. Right?
And there's all new
Some people of color
dynamics
are going
trying
to
to
be
go to
around.
space. Yeah, that's a harder problem than it appears. But the reality is, when people are truly free to be themselves,
Yeah.
the group of people they have around them is not just going to be everybody of one type, and you're going to have this diverse group. And Charlie is kind of representing that dream in a way.
Yeah, I think Charlie is a person who's kind of got an expansive mind. She's curious about a lot of different things. I think that's why she's had so many careers. She's also always going to surround herself with a diverse set of people who have the skills that she needs in her work, or that she's attracted to. And Detroit is a place that has a polarized population, but 9 to 5, we're all thrown together. That's
Mm-hmm.
in our workplaces, and so you're rubbing elbows with all kinds of classes and all kinds of races and all gender identities, and that's the way of the world. And I think we all have to just not only accept it but embrace it as a way to problem solve, because the planet has so many immense problems right now. There's no one group who's going to be able to solve these problems. Jeff Bezos going to space is not going to help our climate problem here in the next 30 years,
No.
as stuff is going to hell. So we have to bring all our brain power to this, all our creativity, our left brain and right brain possibilities, to solve the major problems that this globe has. And Charlie's always going to be that kind of a person who embraces that kind of thinking.
And that makes her, again, this shero, this hero, but
Mhm.
also makes her isolated in that, because a lot of other people will fall back,
Yeah,
and but she's out there doing it, and
yeah,
with
yeah,
strength and grace. But
yeah.
what internally keeps her pushing? What keeps her from just, forget it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think she has a sense of wanting to, again, it's that type A personality,
Hmm.
wanting to do things, and when you do them right. Wanting to be the person at the head of the class, being the person who's maybe not the smartest person in the room, but the person who's trying to connect all the dots and connect the ideas into some big grand plan. It's the reason why in the series she's kind of the principal problem solver, that she uses that technique of those post-its up on the whiteboard to mix and match facts and speculation and ideas and when they're brainstorming, and she's able to see the information and the data that she has in front of her sometimes in a way that others can't. And I think that's really her strength, is that she, like Sherlock Holmes, I would say, is able to take disparate facts, put them in the mixer of her brain, and come out with some speculation, or come out with some ideas, or come out with the aha moment. And I wanted to give her that kind of agency.
Again, folks, you're going to have interesting an interesting story that's going to keep you guessing to the end, that's going to pull you in. The first book in the series, if you don't do anything else, read the first chapter of the first book in the series. And when you read it, you're like, what in the world? I've got to keep reading. And now you're mad at Cheryl because you're up all night.
I had a lot of fun writing that scene.
Oh, that scene, I was like, what in the world? Next thing you know, you're reading more. So, but that's a good problem. That's a good problem, as opposed to, man, I'm battling through the first 10 chapters hoping something happens. It's like, well, can't say that. So
at least not about book one. No. I can sometimes go down the rabbit hole, but I didn't in that one.
So with the relationship, one of the things I found really, really interesting, your relationship between the police and the federal investigators and Charlie and her private team seemed a little more realistic. Sometimes TV it's just like, what's going to happen. Okay, this guy's going to say this, and now the federal guy is going to come in. He's going to be a jerk, and then they're going to make him look stupid. And federal agents are always stupid. And I'm like, how are they always stupid when they law degrees? They can't always be stupid. I mean, they got Al Capone. They can't just be stupid.
Yeah.
And some beat cop is just like, hey, I know more than you,
Yeah, right. Yeah. I approach all these law enforcement people as human beings. I do bring a bias that I don't think just because something comes out of a police officer's mouth that it's the truth. Mm-hmm. I do come with that bias because they're human beings. They don't want to look bad. They want to look like they're the leaders. You can push their buttons just like anybody else. At the same time, I don't want them to look like the Keystone Cops. And so in every story, there'll be at least one or two police officers who get it, who will say to Charlie or Don, I know what the boss said, but if you need some information, call me. I see you're on the right track, So Charlie has this kind of healthy tension between the police force that's helped in some ways because Don's a former Detroit police officer. He can sometimes go in there and get information she can't. But I want to keep that tension there because I think that's real. And, Curtis, I'm an older woman who grew up at a time when they would tell you at school, the police officers are your friend. Mm-hmm. And now I do not believe that at all. As an older Black woman, I'm not so sure I wouldn't run if a police officer stopped me and told me to get out of the car. I don't have the same kind of relationship with, and no Black people should, with police as I did when I was younger. So I think that's a real tension. It'll always be in the books. At the same time, there are good cops. My sister was a police officer. I know they're good cops. I know they're smart cops. Same thing with federal agents. There are some people who are there because they love the job and want to do it well. And there are other people who are there who are not so great, as in any profession.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this one profession has the ability to put you in jail.
They've got so much power
and can carry a gun legally.
Yeah. And they carry a gun.
And they can call, and they have a radio, and they can call more people who have a badge and can carry a gun. And
and policing really has to be reformed. I'm not saying defund the police, but you really need to start from scratch. Who are the people doing this work? How are you recruiting them? How are you training them? How are you retraining them? What's their relationship to the communities they serve? Do they need the kind of weaponry they have? I mean, ask all the questions from the baseline.
Yeah. But it's hard to make people give up their, I think you can build a certain culture, and it's hard to change a culture. And then you got folks who don't always use wisdom when they're dealing with folks who have a badge and a gun. Uh,
Yes.
and like,
Yes.
okay, let's
Yeah.
use a little wisdom here. I'm not saying you got to back down every time, but
Right. No,
on an
you have
empty road and it's just you and and two people with guns and badges, this might not be the time.
that might not be the time to wave the flag and make the point that that at that particular point. That's right.
Because you don't have a privilege that other people have. And,
Unfortunately, we don't. I
yeah,
mean, that's the other part of the tension of walking around as a black person. You that stress, that stressor is always there.
yeah. But I like the way the characters and the way the characters interact. Like you said, they're not just, oh, you're a private investigator. I don't respect you. You're totally outside, because they were all former law enforcement officials.
That's right. And I think that gives them a leg up. They still have relationships in the agencies they served in,
Hmm.
people who respect them. And so that really does help solve some of the problems that come up in the series. At the same time, Charlie, because they're outside of the formality of law enforcement, they're able to do some things that police wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah. In this latest book, there's a little conversation that goes on between Charlie and Don,
Yeah.
where he had some resentment. There's a scene where they were going into a mosque. They were in a mosque, and they were going in this
Yeah.
one area, and Charlie knew to take her shoes off, and she brought a scarf, and the guy
Yeah.
who was there respected that. He thought, "Oh wow, thank you," and he said, "Come on, Don, take your shoes off." And he's like, I ain't doing it." She's like, "What you got?" Later, what, you got holes in your socks or your feet stink or something? Which for a guy that might be the reason. Like, no, I know how my feet smell. I'm not taking them out of here. Okay, that's just as a guy kind of thing.
That's a guy thing.
But that wasn't it. His
No,
was
that wasn't it.
no. I still have a resentment against Muslims after 9/11, and I find that feeling, that feeling also went back. I remember when I was in college and they had the hostage crisis in Iran.
Yeah.
And there were people who, we had Iranian students at my school, and this one dude said, "I hate him because he's Iranian." And I'm thinking, but you're the first one who would tell me I can't say that every white male is a Klansman.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Oh, well, that doesn't affect me. And I find it fascinating, and you touch on that, how one group of folks can have they're all this, they're all that view, but then you can't apply that rule to them. So
Right.
collectivism is selective. It's like, it's bad when it affects me, but it's good when I can throw it on you. And
Yeah.
Don carries that, and Charlie tries to work that out.
Yes, she does. And only because she cares about Don, and she doesn't and she's saying to Mandy he's not really a racist. He's just a Neanderthal. But so she knows that there's some light at the end of the tunnel with Don. Because I think the other thing I try to do in the book is to talk about tolerance, racial tolerance. I think we're all, as Congressman John Lewis used to say, love him. We all came in different boats to this country, but we're all in the same boat now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you'll always see in this series that Charlie approaches cases with empathy, and that she is a person who is a tolerant person of different people's points of views, ways of seeing things, even their mores. In that first book, Curtis, you'll remember there's it's a small thing, but there's a situation where uh no, I don't want to be given a spoiler.
Okay.
But there's a situation where there's a young man and a young woman who get married, and they're half sister and brother, half sister and half brother. I got some pushback on that from people, but it's explained why Charlie doesn't have judgment about that in the book. So you have to read it to see that.
Okay. All right, folks. So you got to get it. You can get all 5, and that way you won't be interrupted. Because once you start reading, I'm telling you, when you read the first chapter of the first book, and see if you read one a month, okay,
You read one of them.
one a month, you're good till the end of the
Wow.
year.
Curtis, I just need to have you be at my house like once a week. so I can keep up my ego here.
Well, it's easy to say good things about good folk. So,
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
so that what we were talking about with the bias and the have it kind of plays into this story where it starts off where a crime, basically a hate crime, is
Mhm.
performed against a mosque, and the groups you have here. So in this latest
Yeah.
book, you deal with hate groups and their operations. How did you research this?
Man, that was a lot of hard work. Actually, I'm in Maine on vacation, and I was in Maine last year this time, and I was listening to public radio, Maine public broadcasting, and they had a gentleman on who was talking about. He was an analyst, and he works as a contractor to the federal government. He was talking about this 2009 FBI report that spoke of the growing influence of hate groups throughout the country. I mean, they were proliferating like mad, all instigated by the candidacy of then Senator Barack Obama. They came out of the woodwork at that point. And this guy talked about this report, and the report talks about how many assassination attempts against Obama were thwarted,
Mm,
and these people out here just coming out of the woodworks with their spewing their hate stuff and forming groups and training and recruiting all over the place. And I was both appalled and fascinated by the notion of this activity. And that was the germ for that book. This number six book, Warn Me When It's Time. And then, as I was writing the book, here come these knuckleheads from the state of Michigan who thought they could kidnap the governor of Michigan.
yeah.
And I thought, oh my goodness, I am on the right track here. Who are these people? And that helped me to really want to plumb um, the mindsets of these mostly white men, not all, but what is the fear driving them? What is the hate driving them? What is the philosophy driving them? And what's giving fuel to this kind of thinking that they would dislike someone so much for her policies that they felt like they could kidnap and murder the governor of Michigan. So the book, this book six, is about these groups in 2009, in the first term of Barack Obama, and the growing influence they have not around the country and around the world, but focusing on a cell of these alt-right groups in southeastern Michigan. And they're still in their beginnings, their nascent origins, but you get a sense of who they are and how they operate, and the mechanics of recruiting and the kind of initiations they have and how they use the internet and how they use the dark web and that kind of thing. And I had to be in the head of one or two of these guys, and it was no fun place to be. But
Mm,
I hope I did justice to not bring any kind of sympathy to the work they do, but I wanted to understand what they were doing and why. So I think I brought a certain amount of empathy to the work, if that makes sense to you. By no means condoning it or making excuses for it, but I had to come at it like you're not crazy and stupid. You're something else that's driving this. So I
yeah.
had to kind of wipe my own bias against these guys out of my head for a few months while I was writing this.
Yeah. And that's tough, but it does come through in the book.
Oh, I hope so.
And and I also think, I learned a lesson uh a long time ago, a hard lesson.
Mm,
You can have a problem with somebody, and when you're talking about them to other people, you can end up making them seem like this big monster, and then when other people meet them or engage with them, they're like,
I'm like,
"Well,
what are you talking
I
about?
thought the person was gonna have horns and breathe fire, and they were just this." And
That's right.
so then all of a sudden your argument loses validity, and people might be more open to hearing them as opposed to
Mhm.
dealing exactly with what the person is. It's hard because your emotions get in there.
Yes, that it is really hard when your emotions get in there. But I think as Americans, we're gonna have to have conversations where we do both talking and listening, and try to push down the anger that spews up so quickly. and or at least walk away from the conversation and agree to come back the next day and try it again. Because otherwise, we're all going to go to hell
Yeah.
in a handbasket if we don't work out race in America. I think it's the number one obstacle from this country being great, being in its own greatness. I think it stands in the way of our ideals and our ability to be the greatest nation in the world.
Yes, and we have, some major competitors out there who do wanna take over, and they
Yes,
outnumber us. I mean,
and
they
they're
could just
crazy. Yes,
and
they outnumber us.
they
That's
I
right.
mean, if somebody has 1,000,000,000 or 2,000,000,000 people and you've
Yeah,
got 300
yeah,
something million,
yeah.
I mean, they don't even have to use all their team.
And that's a we have to hold on to our moral leadership in
Yes,
order to fight back, fight that.
yes,
I don't. It's a really complicated world we live in, and I'm glad that we have someone in the White House now who surrounds themselves with really, really smart people and does the work with empathy and listens to lots of people, including scientists.
yeah. And you would think the pandemic would have kind of changed some
You
ideas
would
that
think so.
here's something that happens that it didn't take well, we're a connected world, and
Yes, we
so
are a connected world.
it gets spread quickly
Yes,
because we're a connected world, as
yes,
opposed to, when I was born in 1961, where it may have just stayed somewhere because people just weren't flying around the world like that.
absolutely right.
Um,
We are so interdependent now. I mean, it's around the economy. We're interdependent. We're certainly interdependent around climate. I think policing is becoming, much more of a interdependent activity.
mhm,
Just we're not operating as loners in the world anymore.
no. And the fact that technology, as great as it is, I mean, it allows us to have this conversation, and you're in Maine and
Yeah,
I'm in Virginia,
yeah,
and and we, I could post this and share it, and anyone in the world could listen, and
absolutely.
I even get a few listens from people in India, like,
Yeah, that's right.
you know,
Oh,
uh, so
great.
what it's a great thing, but it also allows people who are bad to be bad on a different scale, and
It's another tool
yeah.
for them. Yeah, that's right.
And, you touch upon that also in the story about the use of technology and,
Yeah, that's in book 2. In Wake Me When It's Over, the concept of Detroit holding this major event every year, the International Auto Show, and what would happen if domestic terrorists decided to disrupt that show uh, in a year where Detroit is also hosting several weeks later the Super Bowl, which is what happened in 2006 in Detroit. So that idea got stuck in my brain, and I thought, I want to run with that. And so it was also the first year that the Chinese nationals exhibited a car, and so I had to put in a little Chinese espionage because that exists in the world. And at that time, it really existed around automotive technology, and so that's a kind of a major through line there too. I had fun writing that book. I got so deep in the weeds, Curtis, around things like how you run a convention and what's behind the scenes. I was just in geek land around that.
Yeah.
But I had fun doing it. Some people thought I got too geeky, and other people said, "Oh, I love this." So,
Now I like that in books. I haven't had a chance to read book 2 yet, but I like
well,
that.
I think you might like it.
Okay, because I love it also with a mystery because you learn. I like to learn. So if I could read, enjoy a story,
Yeah,
have a good mystery, and then I
yeah,
learn something like, oh yeah, I didn't realize. Yeah, yeah. And also you create a new world that you can write on. It's like an
that's
artist with a
right.
new canvas. You're creating something new, and it's not just the mean streets of Detroit and
Yeah, yeah, and I wanted to just kind of challenge myself. I like thrillers. I'm a big fan of movie thrillers, and so I thought, wow, rather than just stay in kind of mystery land, why not write a thriller? And so that was my attempt to do it, and I think it turned out pretty well.
okay. So we got 6 books in the series.
Yes.
6 wonderful books in the series. And well, first of all, are we going to see a book 7?
Yes, I have several ideas I'm percolating with my publisher right now,
Okay.
and one of them involves kind of more of a Mandy backstory and a case that involves her and her family.
Okay. That'll be
Yeah,
good. That'll be
I think
good.
that's the one I'm leaning towards.
Okay. All right. And now I always like to ask authors, are you, is there a giant board sitting on your wall that has all these post-its and string between it that kind of tells the story?
Like,
Or is it like, that's a nice, is a germ, a seed planted somewhere in your head, and then you sit down and you kind of let it grow? What type of writer are you?
yeah, I'm definitely a plotter.
Okay.
I don't have the big whiteboard, but I have numerous notebooks with notes. I have the last couple of books done the outline after I start the book, though. So I'll just get caught up in the idea and let the emotion of the idea write as long as I can. And then I say to myself, what happens next? That's when I sit down and do the
Okay.
outline and plot it out the rest of the way. I'm finding that hybrid approach is helpful to me and more interesting to me, and I think gives the book a little more emotional heft when I'm just writing it from the passion of the idea first before I plot it out. But I'm definitely a plotter because I like to solve the puzzles, and I like my readers to be caught up in the puzzle and not be able to really see all the intricacies of it or to solve the problem until the very close to the end.
Mhm.
I hate it when I can figure out things in the middle or I see it coming. I hate that.
Yeah. Then you're just hoping, I hope they surprise me. Oh, come on.
I want people to be at 186 pages in and go like, "What?"
So, also some really good news, because I stalk you on Twitter, like all
Okay.
readers do. You have just signed to create a new literary mystery. So can you
Yes.
tell us, first of all, what is a literary mystery, and tell us about this new work?
Yeah, well, it's not a genre mystery in the sense that the Charlie Mack series is, with these standing characters over the course of a series, with a pretty kind of formulaic approach to it. It's a story about a crime that happened in 1920, and there's a modern day protagonist, a newspaper reporter from Detroit, who is trying to solve that crime. Two interconnected stories, two first person narratives, one set in 1920, the other in 2019, looking at this crime that spans over 90 years and the connection between the two protagonists. It was a fun story to write. I was compelled to write it after this story I've had in my mind for a long time because it's based on a true incident in my family. My great grandfather was murdered by Birmingham, Alabama police in
Mm,
1929. And it's something that my mother has talked to me about his daughter a lot over the decades, and information from their family that they've carried with them. And I finally felt compelled after George Floyd's murder to write this story. And so I've written it and have just signed with the Avitas agency, the creative management agency, and a new agent to help me shop that story to a few publishers.
okay, well, I am excited.
I'm excited about it too. Yeah, I think it's going to be well received. I hope. I think it certainly fits in with the Black Lives Matter theme and policing reform theme, but also gives you a sense of the richness of Black communities and the abilities of Black people to, despite Jim Crow laws and all the kinds of obstacles in front of them, to build rich and varied and healthy and happy lives together. Not free of the stressors that racism puts on them, but despite those stressors, they are able to overcome and to build families and build community.
Yeah. Okay. So not to bug you. I know you're
Okay.
probably like, I just got the deal, Curtis. I haven't sat down. But when roughly could we expect to see that?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I have no idea. It would be early if it was next year, to tell the truth. But
Yeah.
I did have a conversation with my agent about, we need to. This is a topical issue, and so you don't want it to stew too long in the juices. So
Yeah.
yes, that's all I can say because I don't know anymore.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
And I do understand because, hey, a year ago this time, the world was different. And a year
Oh
ago,
my
2
goodness.
years ago, the
Oh my
world was
goodness.
very different. And
Dramatically different. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
yeah. But I think the story is going to be interesting no matter when you put it out because I'm fascinated by that, just capturing that. And like you said, I'm also a big fan of works from the Harlem Renaissance, and I've been reading those and
Yeah.
getting some of my friends to read those with me, and we talk about it. And the whole time, one is just wow, listen to the culture and life that was going on, and
Yeah.
the fact that folks were doing it when there were like real obstacles. There's no
Right.
microaggressions at all. There's
No.
nothing micro about any aggression they dealt with.
Nothing was covert. It was
No.
right
So
there in front of you.
the
That's it.
least problem you had was someone wanting to touch your hair. That was the last thing you worried about. You were worried about somebody touching your life
Yes,
and
indeed.
knowing they could do it with, just whatever.
Impunity.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so reading those stories helps me keep things balanced in my life, but also helps me gain a greater appreciation for one, this great writing that they're doing, that people have done, like Hurston, and I'm reading,
Yeah.
we're reading, the works of, Jessie, Fawcett, who
Oh,
she has 4 novels. We read the first book. We talked about There Is Confusion. And it was really a fascinating story. But the one thing we said is, well, when was this? Was this written like a year ago, or is it written 100 years ago?
oh my goodness.
Because
Yeah.
some of the
Isn't it
things that are
something?
discussed are like, okay, that could have been
That could have happened
2020.
last week.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's
So
right. I mean,
uh,
that's interesting that you bring up the Harlem Renaissance because in some ways there's this renaissance of Black writers right now doing
yeah,
all kinds of great fiction. Um, African American writers, but also writers from the African diaspora who are writing, and I think it's almost like a reinvention of the kind of creativity that was happening
yeah,
during the Harlem Renaissance. The poetry is blowing up. The filmmaking, when you look at the filmmaking and all the new African American directors, the new women and people of color directors for TV series, there's a lot of creativity happening right now, both among African American creatives, but also people of color creatives.
yes. And finding a voice. And again, the good thing about technology, I know a lot of people gripe about things, but I think that as someone who, when I was in college and had an interest in Black literature, but it was a treasure hunt. Like, it literally was, oh, I found this book. And it just happened to
Yeah,
stumble upon it. I found this great book, like the title of the
yeah, yeah.
podcast. But,
That's right.
you really had to hunt, you had to put effort in. And now
Uh,
there's more options out there, but now it's a matter of making everyone aware, but we have the tools.
yes,
So there's
right.
less,
Well,
the
we have.
barrier is broken
But it
down more.
takes a site like yours or a podcast like yours sometimes to introduce readers to, this plethora of writers who are doing
Yes.
this work. And then you're just looking at one genre. Yeah,
Yes. I'm just, cause that's all I can't do all of them.
that's no, you can't. That's right.
But I listen to some other podcasts and I have friends like this is one great podcast where they are, and I'm going to put the link in the show notes, folks.
Okay.
It's a podcast of where the creator of the podcast is interviewing Black romance writers.
Ah,
It's called the Black Romance Podcast.
the Black Romance Podcast. Wow. Is Beverly Jenkins on that list?
Yeah, she's interviewed Beverly Jenkins. She did a 2-parter with Beverly Jenkins.
Yeah. Yeah.
Vivian Steffens, Alyssa
Oh, okay.
Cole. I'm just reading
Oh,
through the
yes,
list.
Alyssa
Brenda
Cole.
Jackson,
Yep.
Rebecca Witherspoon,
Oh, Rebecca Witherspoon.
Gwendolyn
Yep.
Pugh.
That's excellent. When I was in Detroit a few years ago doing a book tour, I was going to the libraries, and one of the library book clubs told me I needed to read Beverly Jenkins,
Ah,
whether I like romance or not. I said, okay.
yeah. And it just, and the person who does the podcast is Julia Moody-Freeman.
Excellent.
So
That's
I'll
great.
put the link in the show notes, folks. Her goal, and when I listen to her podcast, is just that she wants to make sure we catalog and capture these interviews with these authors,
That's excellent.
and make it available. And what's great about the world we live in now is that we can have these conversations and anyone in the world can listen. And, a year
Yeah.
from now, someone can stumble upon this and say, well, who was this? And finding the great availability of work that's out there and celebrating it and enjoying it. And speaking of that, you recently wrote the foreword to the reissue of A Mystery by Nikki Baker.
Right.
Can you explain why it was important to write that forward and why
Yeah.
Nikki Baker is someone we should know?
Yes. Well, I'm a Black queer mystery writer, and the first Black queer mystery book I ever saw was at a bookstore in Provincetown, Massachusetts. I looked across the store, and on one of the twirling stands was this Black woman's face and a afro and a scarf. I went, "Well, what's that about?" So I ran over there and snatched up this book called The Virginia Kelly Mystery. It was the Lavender House Murder, which is I believe, the first book in a series of four books that was written by Nikki Baker. And I devoured the book. It was, I'm in Provincetown with a bunch of white lesbians, and I'm not seeing too many other Black women there. And me and Nikki, went back to the guest room that day. you so I stand on her shoulders as a Black queer woman writer. And so when I got the opportunity from the publisher, Requeered Books, to write the forward, I leapt at the opportunity to talk about how the work of Nikki Baker and that series influenced my work and gave me permission to write in the 21st century, this Black queer protagonist, Black female queer protagonist, who heads her own agency. So I was happy to do it, and I hope the forward entices other people to read that series. Nikki was quickly followed, I think, the following year by Penny Mickleberry,
Hmm.
who writes a mystery series as well, who's a good friend of mine, and who continues to write. But Nikki Baker stopped writing that series after the fourth book. So
Mm.
yeah,
The other purpose of my podcast, I want to just make sure everyone knows about all of you writers and what you're doing. And also, selfishly, if we can keep you writing, because if we can keep buying
oh,
books, we can keep you writing. So,
thank
it's
you.
it's really all
Appreciate
about me and my need for more books.
No, it is your generosity actually that is helping the whole group of writers of color, especially ones who write crime fiction, and who get together, and we have a little group, as you know, Curtis. It really keeps us engaged, and it keeps us loved up.
Well,
So
definitely,
keeps us going.
definitely. And and again, I think what's great about um, what you're doing, and by you having Charlie Mack there, uh, it's important that she's represented and there is some young person who is not
Mm,
seeing themselves.
right.
And it's easy for people to say, well, I don't really see what the big deal is when you see yourself everywhere.
That's
Uh,
exactly right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
Easy for them to say.
it's
That's
just,
right.
and trying to make people understand, it's kind of like, well, if every morning you can get up and run to water and brush your teeth and take a shower, and you don't see what the big deal is until you get up and you can't do that. And
Exactly.
it's that kind of level. Um, it's not a matter of, well, but there's all these other things. Then why can't you just picture yourself in that? But yeah,
Yeah.
but why should I
Yeah.
have to do that all the time? And it's 10 times harder for people who are non-heterosexual,
Yeah.
who are Black, because
Right.
you got first you're Black, then you're a woman, so you got to deal
Yeah.
with that. So you got
Yeah.
to navigate the world as a woman. In
Right.
your case, you
Right.
got to navigate the world as a woman, so you got to deal with dudes, and then
Right.
then you're Black, so it means you got to deal with people who have their attitude about Black people, and then you got to catch it from folks who are like, well, what? Who are you with?
Yeah.
And I'm going to police
Yeah.
who you're with, and
And our own community,
in our own community that's slowly but surely being
Yes,
pulled
slowly but
forward.
surely. Yeah.
Even though it was okay for certain people and we didn't say nothing, but I don't want you to say something. And it's like, well, the words we end up using as the
Yeah.
Black community sound
Mhm.
really similar. Really, all you need to do is put a good Southern twang on it, and it pretty much sounds like you're in Mississippi and you're a different complexion.
Right. That's
Well, I
so
just
true.
don't think they should be here. Well, wait a minute. Do you realize someone said that about you 20,
You know,
30 years ago?
that's why it's so amazing to me that Black people, we should not like be in the middle of anybody's oppression because we are only a half step from being put back
Right.
in chains if we let some people in charge. So we need to be very careful about that.
So I think it's so great. And I champion what you do. And by your
Thank you.
books being there, you'll never know. There's some young lady who's reading your book who's feel seen and also sees like, wow, I could be a sleuth, or, because we all grow up in reading things. And, there are a lot of people who grew up loving Sherlock Holmes, even though they weren't
Yeah.
British,
Right.
but
That's
they were
right.
male and white and they could see themselves as being like that. And to not have to always project yourself into someone who's totally unlike you, and also someone whose life it kind of projects what yours might be like, or you can learn, oh, okay, so I can live, I can
Right.
love
Right. Right.
and be happy.
And at the same time, I'm thinking about mainstream and meaning white straight readers being able to read a story and have some understanding of what a Black queer life is like.
Yeah.
It's really not that different from what their
No,
lives actually, but if I inform them about that, then I think I've done a service.
or just showing folks that, oh, okay, it isn't that different.
Oh, you have a dog too? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, oh, your fight about money too? Oh,
Yeah, you got a dog. Oh, yeah. Oh, you
oh,
forgot to bring home the milk.
yeah. Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I thought, I, I because as humans, we tend to get in our little groups and we think the world is our group and everything else is strange and people don't
Right.
do the normal things we do. And if you travel around the world, you realize most people are just trying to get groceries and go home and fix dinner. And I had that experience. I was in France. I was in the military. I
Yeah.
was in France. I saw this one poor lady. She was coming out the little store. She had her bag and
Her
her
baguette
bread and her
sticking out of
big
her
bread
bread
sticking
out
out.
of her bag.
But she was booking down the street because she was like, I got to get home. And and I said, you know what? She is no different than
Yes.
somebody going to, in Cleveland, we had the
That's
A&P,
right.
going to the
That's right.
A&P, getting
Right.
their food, I got to get
That's right.
home and cook dinner. I just got off work late and,
That's right.
all I
That's
want to
right.
do is sit and put my feet up and relax a minute. And
That's
that's
right.
pretty much
Right. Or the
90.
or the pig or the piggly wiggly in some little
Yeah.
southern town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all kind of, it's only a few people who are rich enough where they don't have to worry about that. And
That's exactly right.
everybody else is just, look, I'm just trying to get dinner on the table.
We're all in the same boat now.
Yes. So, and all of that was to say that I really think that, there are countless young old people who are reading your books and are going to feel seen, and you may never hear them or see them, but the fact that your work is out there is important.
Thank
And
you.
it's definitely something that's needed, besides the fact that it's just a good mystery and a good read.
Oh,
Uh, it's also a good statement.
I appreciate that, Curtis. Thank you for doing the interview, and thank you for what you're doing to help crime and mystery writers, and especially the ones who are writers of color. I appreciate you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And folks, you can go to ifoundthisgreatbook.com/138. There we will have all the notes and links and cool things we talked about here. So if you're like, oh man, what was this? What was that site where the romance was? Or where can I go? Where can I go to Cheryl page? Or what are the books she wrote? What are relax, calm down. Just go to ifoundthisgreatbook.com/138. I'll have everything there. And you can find Cheryl's books anywhere you buy books. But if you go to ifoundthisgreatbook.com/138, yeah, I'll have links right there and all her books will be listed. Cheryl, thank you, thank you, thank you. I really, really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. This has been a fantastic pleasure. I could keep talking to you, but I realize you probably have to put dinner on the table. So I'm not going to keep holding you on. I do have to temper myself. Thank you so
Curtis,
much.
thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
And for everybody, be safe and have a great reading day.